The grand negotiation chamber of Aurelia 7 was filled with representatives from both civilizations. Humans and Volanti seated on opposite sides of a massive curved table with the treaty documents displayed on holographic screens between them. Queen Yonha sat at the center of her delegation, her royal robes arranged perfectly and her expression revealing nothing of the tension that coiled inside her chest. Across from her, Admiral Cross sat with equal composure, playing her part in the deception they had planned. The trap was set, and now they waited for Tajan to spring it. High General Tajan stood among the Volanti military advisors, his posture rigid with barely concealed anticipation, his compound eyes flickering toward the chamber doors. Every few moments, he believed the Queen was isolated, that her council had abandoned him, that this was the perfect moment to strike and blame the humans for her death. He did not know that every guard in the room had been carefully selected, that human and Volanti security forces were working together for the first time in history, that his own communications had been intercepted and his conspirators identified. The treaty signing began with the usual formalities, speeches about peace and cooperation and the bright future that awaited both their peoples. Yonha spoke her lines with practiced ease, all while watching Tajan from the corner of her eye. And then, exactly as they had predicted, Tajan made his move. He raised his hand in what appeared to be a signal, and suddenly soldiers loyal to him pushed forward from the edges of the room, weapons drawn and aimed at the Queen. In the name of Volanti honor, Tajan declared, his voice ringing through the chamber, I arrest Queen Yonha for the crime of betraying her people to our enemies, and I take command of this delegation under martial authority. Gasps and shouts erupted from both sides of the table, and the human delegates scrambled back in apparent confusion. But Yonha remained seated, her expression unchanged. Is that all? She asked calmly. Tajan's eyes widened in surprise at her lack of fear, and that surprise turned to horror as the doors of the chamber burst open and loyal Volanti guards poured in alongside human security forces. Conspirators found themselves surrounded, outnumbered, their weapons suddenly pointed at allies they did not expect. You were saying something about betrayal, Yonha said, rising to her feet with cold fury in her voice. Please, continue. General. Tajan's face twisted with rage, and he lunged toward the Queen with his ceremonial blade drawn, abandoning all pretense of legal authority. But Tajan was faster. The human sergeant intercepted Tajan's charge, blocking the blade with his good arm and driving his shoulder into the general's chest. They crashed to the floor together, struggling for control of the weapon. While chaos erupted around them, the loyal guards engaged the conspirators in close combat, plasma bolts flashing through the air as both sides fought for control of the chamber. Yina watched Tajan and Tajan struggle, her hearts pounding as the two males wrestled across the polished floor. Tajan was larger and stronger, his chitinous exoskeleton providing natural armor against Tajan's strikes. But the human fought with a desperate skill that seemed to surprise the general. Finally, Tajan managed to twist the blade from Tajan's grip and pinned the general to the floor. With his knee pressed against the Volanti's thorax, he raised the ceremonial blade, its edge gleaming in the chamber lights, and Yonha saw Tajan's eyes fill with the certainty of death. But Tajan did not strike. Instead, he reversed the blade and offered it hilt first to the nearest Volanti guard. Take him into custody, Tajan said, breathing hard from exertion and pain from his still healing wounds. He should face justice according to your laws, not die on a human blade. The chamber fell silent as everyone processed what they had witnessed. A human soldier, who had every reason to kill a Volanti general, had chosen mercy instead, had chosen to honor their laws and their dignity. Even in the heat of battle, Yonha felt something shift in the room, something intangible but profound. As both humans and Volanti looked at each other with new eyes, this was what peace could look like, she realized. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of respect, even in the midst of it. The conspirators surrendered quickly after that, their will broken by the defeat of their leader and by the display of unity they had not believed possible within an hour. The chamber was secured, and the wounded were being treated, and the treaty documents were once again displayed on the holographic screens, but before the signing could resume, Yana had something she needed to do. She walked across the chamber to where Do-hyun stood, his arm being examined by a human medic, and the crowd parted before her in surprise. "Sergeant Park," she said, her voice carrying through the silent room. "You have served with honor and distinction, and you have shown my people something valuable today." Do-hyun started to bow, but she stopped him with a gesture. "I am told that in human culture, acts of great service are recognized with new responsibilities," she continued. "And so I wish to offer you a position, if you will accept it." "What position?" "Your Majesty," he asked. "I would have you serve as the permanent human liaison to the Volanti throne," she said. "A bridge between our peoples, ensuring that the peace we build today continues to grow." The room erupted in murmurs of surprise, but Yana kept her eyes fixed on Do-hyun's face. She saw uncertainty there, and hope, and something else that made her heart flutter. "I would be honored," he said finally, and his voice was thick with emotion. He did not try to hide the treaty was signed that day, marking the first formal alliance between humans and Volanti in the history of both civilizations. And when the ceremonies were complete and the delegates had retired to celebrate, Yana found herself standing at a window overlooking the stars, watching the lights of ships moving between worlds that were no longer enemies. Do-hyun joined her there, standing close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence. "You did well today," she said softly. "We did well," he corrected gently. "Together." She turned to face him, looking up into eyes that were so familiar and yet belonged to someone entirely new. "You are not Valathos," she said, and the words carried no pain, only acceptance. "But you have taught me something he always believed, that there is always hope, even after the worst loss, even when the darkness seems endless. And you have taught me," Do-hyun replied, "that courage can be gentle, and that opening your heart to new connections does not diminish what you have lost." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars that had witnessed so much bloodshed between their peoples. The future was uncertain, full of challenges and obstacles that neither of them could predict. But for the first time in 15 years, Yana felt hope blooming in her chest like a flower opening to sunlight. She was not replacing Valathos, would never forget him or the love they shared, but she was learning to live again, to feel again, to connect again, and standing beside her was a human who understood that journey better than anyone. "What happens now?" Do-hyun asked quietly. Anha looked at him and allowed herself a small smile, the first genuine smile she had worn in longer than she could remember. "Now we build something new," she said. "Together," and as the stars burned bright against the darkness of space, two souls who had been broken by war found the first fragile threads of healing in each other. The universe had sent them a strange gift, wrapped in loss and pain and impossible coincidence, but perhaps that was how the best stories always began. The investigation into the assassination attempt revealed a truth that Yana had feared but hoped would not be confirmed. The assassin was not human, not some enemy agent from a rival power, but a Volanti soldier from her own royal guard who had been bought by someone within her. Empire Counselor Minseok delivered the news in her private chambers, his voice heavy with anger and grief. "We traced the communications to High General Taejin," he said, the name dropping into the silence like a stone into still water. "He has been coordinating with a faction of military leaders who believe this alliance with humanity will weaken us." Yana closed her eyes and let the betrayal wash over her. Taejin had served her family for 3 generations, had stood at her father's side during the darkest days of the war, had been one of the voices urging caution when she announced her intention to seek peace with the humans. She had thought his opposition was merely conservative reluctance to change, not active conspiracy to murder her. "How many support him?" she asked. "Unknown," Minseok admitted. "But the military caste still harbors deep resentment toward humanity. And Taejin is respected among the old guard who remember the war. Then we cannot move against him directly," Yana said, opening her eyes and letting her mind shift into the cold calculation that leadership required. "If we arrest him without proof that his supporters cannot deny, we risk civil conflict." A knock at the door interrupted their conversation, and Minseok moved to answer it with his weapon ready. But it was only Sergeant Do-Yun Park, standing in the corridor with his arm in a medical sling and his face still pale from his injuries. "Forgive the intrusion, Your Majesty," he said, "but I have information that may be useful." Yona gestured for him to enter, noting the way Minseok watched the human with a mixture of suspicion and something that might have been grudging. "Respect. You should be resting," she said. But there was no real reproach in her voice. "I have rested enough," Do-Yun replied, a hint of stubbornness in his tone that reminded her painfully of Velathos. "And when I heard about General Taejin, I knew I had to come." "You know of the conspiracy?" Minseok asked sharply. "Admiral Cross informed me," Do-Yun said, "and she has authorized me to offer whatever assistance I can, because this threat affects both our peoples." He turned to face Yona directly, and she saw determination burning in his eyes. "I have some experience with situations like this," he continued. "Enemies who hide among allies, conspiracies that cannot be confronted openly, and I believe I know a way to draw them out." "Speak," Yana commanded. "We let them think they are winning," Do-Yun said. "We make it appear that the negotiations are failing, that your council is turning against you, that the alliance is crumbling, and Taejin will grow confident and make his move openly." "A trap," Minseok said slowly, his antennae twitching as he considered the idea. "But risky, because if Taejin suspects deception, he will simply wait for another opportunity. Then we must be convincing," Do-Yun replied. "And that means working together, human and Volanthi, in ways that will require trust." He looked at Yonha again, and she saw something vulnerable beneath his professional manner. "I know I am asking a great deal, Your Majesty, but I believe this is the best path forward." Yonha considered his words carefully, weighing the risks against the potential rewards if they succeeded. They would eliminate the conspiracy and demonstrate to both their peoples that cooperation was possible. If they failed, she would likely die, and the war would begin again. But looking at this human who had already risked his life for her, she found that she trusted him in a way she could not fully explain. "We will do it," she said, "but we will need to meet privately to plan the details, and that will require discretion." What followed were days of secret meetings in hidden corners of the station, Yonha and Do-Yun working together while Minseok stood guard and watched with increasingly complicated expressions. During those long hours of planning, they talked about more than just strategy. I found herself sharing memories of Velathus, speaking about him for the first time since his death, describing the way he laughed and the way he held her and the way he saw good in everyone. Around him, Do-Yun listened without interruption, his calm presence creating a space where she felt safe to be vulnerable, and in return, he shared his own grief, telling her about his wife Soin and their daughter Minji, about the life they had built together and the dreams they had shared before everything was taken away. "I used to be so angry," he admitted one evening, his voice soft in the dim light of the storage room where they had hidden to talk. "I wanted to burn the whole galaxy down, to make everyone feel the pain I was feeling." "What changed?" Yana asked. "Time," he said, "and the realization that Soin would not have wanted that." She believed in kindness even when it was hard, and I knew that if I gave in to the hatred, I would be betraying everything she stood for. Yonha reached out and touched his face, a gesture that surprised them both. Tracing the line of his jaw that was so familiar and yet belonged to someone entirely different. "You remind me so much of him," she said. "And yet, you are not him. You are something else. Something new." Diane placed his hand over hers gently, his skin warm against her cool palm. "Whoever he was," he said softly, "he was honored to be loved by you. I am certain of that." They stayed like that for a long moment, connected by grief and by something else that was slowly growing. Between them finally, Minsiok cleared his throat from the doorway. "Breaking the spell, the preparations are complete," he said. And if he had any opinions about what he had just witnessed, he kept them hidden behind his professional manner. "Taejun has taken the bait, and he plans to move during tomorrow's treaty signing." Yonha pulled her hand back and felt the familiar weight of duty settling onto her shoulders. "Then we must be ready," she said, her voice steady even as her hearts raced with anticipation and fear. Tomorrow would determine the fate of two civilizations, and she would face it with a human soldier at her side. It was not what she had expected when she came to this station, but perhaps it was exactly what she needed. The universe worked in mysterious ways, and sometimes the greatest gifts came wrapped in the most unlikely forms. The medical bay of Aurelia 7 was a place of white walls and humming machines and the sharp smell of antiseptic that stung Yonha's sensitive. And Tenishi had been sitting in the waiting area for 6 hours, refusing to leave despite the protests of her advisors and the confused looks from the human. Medical Staff Sergeant Do-hyun Park was in surgery, and she would not move until she knew whether he would live or died. The plasma bolt had struck him in the upper chest, missing his heart by centimeters, but causing severe damage to his lung and several major blood vessels. The human doctors had rushed him into the operating chamber immediately, and since then there had been nothing but silence, and waiting counselor Minsiok sat beside her, his presence a quiet comfort, even though he clearly did not understand why she was so affected by the fate of one human guard. "My queen," he said gently, "perhaps you should rest, and I will inform you immediately if there is any news." "No," Yonha replied, her voice flat and final. "I will stay." She could not explain to him why this mattered so much, could not put into words the terrible feeling that had seized her when she watched Do-hyun fall. It was as if she was losing Velathos all over again, watching helplessly as someone she cared about was struck down while protecting others. And that thought itself was confusing, because she did not know this human had spoken to him only once. And yet the pain she felt was as sharp and real as any grief she had ever experienced. Perhaps it was simply the resemblance, the cruel trick of fate that had given him the face of her lost love, or perhaps there was something more, something about the man himself that had touched her in ways she did not want to examine too closely. A human doctor emerged from the surgical wing, her face tired but not grim, and Yonha rose to her feet immediately. "He is stable," the doctor said, speaking to Admiral Cross, who had also been waiting nearby. "The damage was extensive, but we managed to repair the worst of it, and he should make a full recovery with time." Yonha felt relief flood through her body so intensely that she had to grip the back of a chair to keep from swaying. "When can he receive visitors?" she heard herself ask, and everyone in the room turned to look at her with various expressions of surprise. The doctor recovered quickly and answered with professional courtesy, "He's in recovery now, but should be conscious within a few hours, and short visits would be permitted after that." "I wish to see him," Yonha said. "As soon as possible." Admiral Cross raised an eyebrow but said nothing, and Minsiok made a small sound of concern that she ignored. 3 hours later, Yonha entered the recovery room where Do-hyun lay connected to machines that monitored his vital signs and delivered medication through tubes in his arms. He looked pale and fragile against the white sheets. So different from the strong and confident guard she had observed. And yet, there was still something of Velathos in the lines of his sleeping face. She sat in the chair beside his bed and waited, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest as proof that he lived. When his eyes finally opened, they were unfocused at first, drifting around the room before landing on her and widening in surprise. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice rough and weak. "What are you doing here?" "You saved my life," she replied simply, "and I wish to thank you personally." He tried to shift in the bed and winced at the pain the movement caused. But he managed a small smile anyway. "It is my duty to protect those in my care. And you do not need to thank me for doing my job. You could have died," Yana said. And her voice cracked slightly on the last word despite her efforts to control it. "You nearly did die. And for what? For a queen you do not know. From a species that was your enemy." Dohyun was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer and more thoughtful. "The war ended 15 years ago, Your Majesty, and I choose to believe in the peace we are building. Because if we cannot move past the hatred and the killing, then what was the point of all that suffering?" Yona stared at him, startled by the depth of his words and the quiet conviction behind them. "You lost people in the war," she said. "And it was not a question. My wife and daughter," he confirmed. And she saw old pain flicker across his face before he controlled it. "They were on New Bizan when the Volanthi raided the colony, and I was stationed on a ship 2 systems away and could do nothing to save them." Yonha felt as if the air had been knocked from her lungs. This man, this human who looked so much like her lost love, had suffered the same kind of loss at the hands of her own people. He had every reason to hate her, to let her die, to take revenge for what the Volanthi had taken from him, and instead he had thrown himself in front of a plasma bolt to save her life. "Why?" she whispered, the word escaping before she could stop it. "Why would you save me after what my people did to your family?" Dohyun looked at her with those calm, steady eyes, and she saw no hatred there, no resentment. Only a kind of weary peace, because holding on to that hatred was destroying me, he said. "I spent years wanting revenge, wanting to make someone pay for what I lost. And it nearly killed me in ways that had nothing to do with combat." He paused to catch his breath, and she waited in silence for him to continue. "A friend told me once that hatred is like drinking poison and expecting your enemy to die," he said. "And eventually, I realized he was right. And I had to choose whether to let go of the anger or let it consume whatever was left of me. And you chose to let go." Yanha said softly. "I chose to try," he replied. "Every day I choose to try, and some days are harder than others. But I believe that building peace is more important than settling old scores." Yonha felt tears gathering in her eyes, a display of emotion that would be considered shameful among her people. But she did not try to hide them. "You remind me of someone," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Someone I lost in the war. Someone who believed the same things you do." Dohyun did not ask who she meant, did not press for details, simply nodded with understanding. "Then he must have been a wise person," he said gently. "He was," Yanha agreed. And for the first time in 15 years, speaking of Velathos did not feel like a wound being torn open. It felt like something else. Something she could not name, but that carried a hint of warmth she had forgotten existed. She stayed with Dohyun until the medical staff insisted she leave. And as she walked back to her chambers, she felt something shifting inside her. The universe had sent her a reminder of what she had lost. But perhaps it had also sent her something more. Perhaps it had sent her proof that even after the worst pain imaginable, healing was possible, and perhaps that was exactly what she needed to see. Counselor Minziok returned to the Queen's chambers before the first meal cycle with a data tablet clutched in his clawed hands and a troubled expression on his face. Iona had not slept at all. spending the night hours staring at the ceiling and fighting against memories that refused to stay buried. And she was grateful for any distraction from her thoughts. "What did you find?" she asked. Not bothering with formal greetings, Mensik placed the tablet on the table and activated its holographic display. And the face of the human guard appeared in blue light. Rotating slowly, "His name is Sergeant Do-Yoon Park," Minsiak said. "Age 38 standard years, born on the human colony world of New Bizen. Currently serving in the Confederacy Security Forces with 12 years of exemplary service." Yana studied the holographic face and felt her heart constrict painfully in her chest. For even in this artificial rendering, the resemblance to Velithos was undeniable. "Is he connected to any intelligence operations?" she asked. "Any special assignments that might explain why he was placed in my path?" "None that I can find," Minsiak replied. And his antennae drooped with what she recognized as genuine confusion. "His record is remarkably ordinary for a human soldier, decorated for bravery in several engagements, but nothing that suggests he is anything other than what he appears to be." "Then how do you explain this?" Yanha demanded, gesturing at the hologram. "This cannot be coincidence." Minsiok was silent for a long moment before answering. And when he spoke, his voice was gentle in a way he rarely allowed. "My queen, the universe is vast and contains trillions of beings across thousands of species. And sometimes patterns repeat in ways that have no deeper meaning. And I believe this is one of those times," Yonha wanted to argue. Wanted to insist that there must be some explanation that made sense. But she knew that Minsiok was probably right. The humans had no reason to know about Velithos, no way to understand what he meant to her. And they certainly had no technology that could re-aid his appearance in one of their own kind. This was simply a cruel accident of biology and chance. Nothing more. "There is something else you should know," Minsiok continued, his voice growing more hesitant. "Sergeant Park has been assigned to your personal protection detail for the duration of the negotiations." Yanha closed her eyes and felt something like despair wash over her. "Of course he has. Admiral Cross considers it an honor posting," Minsiak explained. "Placing one of their most trusted guards in direct protection of a visiting head of state. And refusing the assignment would be seen as an insult." "I understand," Yana said, opening her eyes and straightening her spine with an effort of will. "I will simply have to endure it." The first day of negotiations passed in a blur of proposals and counterproposals, demands and concessions. And Yonha forced herself to focus on the words being spoken rather than the human guard, who stood at the edge of the room, but she could not help stealing glances at him when she thought no one was watching. And each time she did, she noticed something new that reminded her of Velithos, the way he stood with his hands clasped behind his back, patient and alert, the slight tilt of his head when someone spoke, as if he was truly listening rather than simply waiting for his turn to respond, the kindness in his eyes when he looked at the younger guards under his command, offering small nods of encouragement that they probably did not even notice Velithos had been the same way, always aware of those around him, always seeking to lift others up rather than push them down. It was one of the things she had loved most about him, and one of the things that made his loss so devastating during a break in the negotiations. Yanha found herself standing near a window that overlooked the station's central atrium. Watching the flow of humans and aliens going about their daily business, she sensed someone approach and turned to find Sergeant Park standing a respectful distance away, his posture formal but not rigid. "Forgive the intrusion, Your Majesty," he said, his voice deeper than she expected and carrying an accent she did not recognize. "But I wanted to ensure you were comfortable and that the security arrangements meet your approval." This was the first time he had spoken directly to her, and Yoha felt her mouth go dry. His voice was different from Velithos. That much was clear, but there was something in its tone that felt familiar anyway. a warmth beneath the professional courtesy. "The arrangements are adequate," she managed to say, proud that her voice did not tremble. "Your people have been thorough. We take the safety of our guests seriously," Do-yoon replied. And then he did something that surprised her. He smiled, just slightly, and it transformed his face entirely in that moment. He looked so much like Valathos that she had to look away. "Is something wrong, Your Majesty?" he asked. And she could hear genuine concern in his voice. "No," she said quickly. "Perhaps too quickly. I am merely tired from the journey and the negotiations." Nothing more. She walked away before he could respond. Her heart's pounding so hard she was certain everyone could hear them that night, alone in her chambers. She allowed herself to remember. She remembered the day she first met Valathos, a minor noble from a distant province who had come to court seeking opportunity and found love instead. She remembered how he had challenged her assumptions about strength and power, showing her that true courage could be gentle as well as fierce. She remembered their bonding ceremony, held in secret because a queen was not supposed to choose her own mate, and the scandal that followed when their union was discovered. She remembered the years of happiness they shared, brief and precious, and the child they had hoped to have but never did. And she remembered the day the message came, informing her that High Consort Valathos had fallen in battle on Varantis Prime, killed while shielding civilians from human weapons. She had not been there to hold him, had not been able to say goodbye, and that absence had haunted her ever since a soft chime interrupted her memories. And Minseok's voice came through the door speaker. "My queen, forgive the late hour, but there is an urgent security matter that requires your attention." Yeonha wiped her eyes and composed herself before answering. "Enter." Minseok came through the door, with his weapon drawn and his antennae standing straight up in alarm. "We have intercepted communication suggesting an assassination attempt," he said rapidly. "Someone on this station wants you dead, and they plan to strike during tomorrow's session." Before Yeonha could respond, an explosion rocked the corridor outside her chambers, and the world dissolved into chaos and fire and screaming. She felt herself thrown to the ground, felt hands grabbing her and pulling her toward the emergency exit. And through the smoke and confusion, she saw a figure in human uniform moving toward her with a weapon. Race time seemed to slow as she watched the plasma bolt leave the barrel, watched it arc toward her chest, watched her death approaching with terrible certainty. And then Sergeant Do-yoon Park was there, throwing himself between her and the weapon, taking the shot that was meant for her heart. He fell without a sound, and Yeonha screamed. Queen Yeonha stepped off her royal transport and onto the cold metal floor of Galactic Diplomatic Station, Aurelia 7. And she carried herself with the dignity that her people expected from their ruler. The Volanthi Empire had not sent its monarch to meet with humans in over 50 years. And the last time such a meeting occurred, it ended in bloodshed and a war that lasted 2 decades. But times had changed, and a new threat called the Kethrani Swarm was consuming entire star systems on the edge of known space. And neither the Volanthi nor the humans could face this enemy alone. So here she was, walking into territory controlled by the species her people had fought and killed and lost so much to, all in the name of survival and a fragile hope for alliance. Her royal guards flanked her on both sides, their chitinous armor gleaming under the artificial lights of the station. And behind them walked her advisors and diplomats and servants who had accompanied her on this journey. Counselor Minseok, her spymaster and oldest friend, walked closest to her left side, his compound eyes scanning every corner and shadow for threats. "The humans have provided adequate security arrangements," he said in their native tongue, his voice a low hum that only she could hear. "But I do not trust them fully. My queen, trust is not required," Yeonha replied without turning her head. "Only cooperation and mutual benefit. And that is what we shall achieve here." She had rehearsed these words many times during the journey, convincing herself that she could do this, that she could face the humans without letting old wounds tear open and bleed. The war had taken so much from her people, but it had taken something far more personal from her as well. Something she had never spoken about to anyone except Minseok 15 years ago, during a human counterattack on the colony world of Verantis Prime. Her mated died high consort. Velethos had been everything she was not supposed to want in a partner. Gentle, where Volanti males were expected to be fierce. Kind, where cruelty was considered strength. And loving in ways that her culture did not have words for. He had died protecting a group of civilians from human soldiers, throwing himself between plasma fire and children who were not even his own. And she had never stopped grieving for him. She pushed those memories down, as she always did, and focused on the task ahead. The human delegation was waiting at the end of the corridor. A group of officials in formal uniforms standing in neat rows. And at their head was Admiral Helena Cross, the commander of this station and the human representative for these negotiations. Queen Yonha of the Volanti Empire, the Admiral said with a slight bow. "Welcome to Aurelia 7, and we are honored by your presence." "Admiral Cross," Yana responded, her voice translator converting her words into the human language. "We thank you for your hospitality and look forward to productive discussions." The pleasantries continued for several minutes, each side exchanging carefully prepared statements of goodwill and hope for peace. And Yonha found herself growing tired of the performance. She had done this countless times with other species and other rulers. And it was always the same dance of words that meant little, until the real negotiations began. But then something happened that shattered her composure completely, as the Admiral gestured for her to follow toward the diplomatic quarters. The security formation shifted, and a new group of human guards took position around the delegation. Yuna's eyes moved across them automatically, assessing threats as she had been trained to do since childhood. And then her gaze landed on one particular human, and she stopped breathing. He stood at the edge of the formation. A tall man with broad shoulders and a face that made her heart stutter in her chest. His skin was a warm brown tone, and his dark hair was cut short in military fashion. And his eyes were deep and calm and held a quiet strength that she recognized instantly. He looked exactly like Velethosnod, similar or vaguely resembling, but exactly like him in every feature and proportion. As if someone had taken her dead mate and transformed him into a human form. The shape of his jaw, the set of his brow, the way he stood with his weight slightly forward, as if ready to move at any moment. It was all the Sami Yonha felt the world tilt around her. And for a terrible moment, she thought she might collapse in front of everyone. "My queen," Minseok whispered urgently at her side, his hand brushing her arm in concern. "Are you unwell?" She forced herself to breathe, forced her legs to keep moving, forced her face to remain neutral, even as her mind screamed questions that had no answers. "I'm fine," she said, though her voice sounded strange to her own ears. "The journey was long, and I am merely tired." The Admiral did not seem to notice anything wrong, and the procession continued through the station toward the quarters that had been prepared for the Volanti delegation. But Yonha could not stop herself from looking back at the human guard. And each time she did, the pain in her chest grew sharper. Who was he? And why did he wear the face of the one she had lost? And was this some kind of trick designed to destabilize her before the negotiations? She would not put such tactics past the humans, for they were known throughout the galaxy for their cunning and their willingness to use any advantage when they finally reached her private chambers and the doors closed behind her. She turned to Minseok with fire in her eyes. "That human guard," she said, her voice barely controlled, "the one standing at the left of the formation. I want to know everything about him." Minseok tilted his head. his antennae twitching in confusion, and she realized that he had not seen what she had seen. That he did not understand. "Which guard do you mean?" "My queen. The tall one with the calm eyes," she said. And then she made herself speak the words that burned in her throat. "He looks exactly like Velithos." Minsiok went very still, and she saw the recognition dawn in his compound eyes. The understanding of why she was so shaken. He had known Velithos well, had served both of them during their brief years together, and he alone knew the depth of her grief. "I will investigate immediately," he said, bowing his head. "If this is a human manipulation tactic, I will uncover it." "Do so quickly," Yona said, turning away to face the window that looked out upon the stars. "I cannot afford distractions during these negotiations. I need to know if this is coincidence or conspiracy." After Minsiok left, she stood alone in the darkness of her chambers and let herself feel what she had been suppressing. The Physm memory of Velithos rose up like a wave. His gentle touch and his soft voice and the way he looked at her, as if she was the most precious thing in the universe. She had buried that grief for 15 years, had locked it away and focused on ruling her empire and protecting her people. And she had believed that she was past the worst of it, but now, seeing that human face that was so impossibly familiar, she knew that she had only been hiding from her pain, not healing from it, and tomorrow she would have to face him again. This guard who wore the face of her dead love. And somehow she would have to pretend that it did not break her heart to look at him. The stars outside her window burned cold and distant, and Queen Yanha of the Volanti Empire felt more alone than she had in 15 years.